For our readers who are unfamiliar, can you provide a brief background of how and why you co-founded the B Corp, what the mission of TBC is, and how its status as a benefit corporation impacts your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope I get all those. So we got started after starting a beekeeping club at Indiana University. So we had gotten a grant from the Hutton Honors College there to start that program. My co-founder Wyatt and I, with some other students, and we decided to, after encouragements from some folks at the IU Foundation, decided to dream bigger about how we could help with problems associated with beehive health. And so we actually put a business model together and entered it into, it was called the Best Competition. We ended up winning, which gave us funding to start our business. It was pretty crazy. And so we got that started. We were all seniors in undergrad, so we actually went just straight into that. And that was in 2016. And we're still kicking. And then you asked about being a benefit corporation. So none of us actually who founded the company, none of us were business students. And, I never imagined even working in the private sector. I got a public affairs degree, so I expected to be working in for the government or for a nonprofit. So when we were encouraged to, pursue our passions with beekeeping, our advisors basically said, we'll help you with whatever it ends up being, a nonprofit, a for-profit. We just think you guys are really passionate and this could be really useful. So we were in our first meeting with those advisors, and we were trying to decide, we were going through the model, what made sense, and a lawyer was on the call, and she mentioned benefit corporations as an option. And for us, it felt like such a good fit to who we are as people. So we believe in, we want our careers to have a positive impact on society and the environment, and also the business model we were focused on. So it was a great way to make sure we never lost that. The business never lost, the spirit of the people who founded it. And it just fit really naturally. And that's when we came up with the name, the B Corp. So we could be a B Corp and a B Corp.
Can you speak a bit to your personal role at the B Corp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as founder and CEO, I do a lot of things. I typically focus a lot on bringing money into the organization. So I help with sales, do funding through grants and investment. But I think the most fun part of what I do is I manage the team. I help create our company culture. Obviously, every single employee is a huge part of how we've evolved that and developed that. But I really enjoy, managing the team and the people. And I've just been pretty excited to see how everybody has grown and how, awesome our company has become in the last 4 years. So that's my favorite part about what I do.
So just to pivot a bit to the technology that the B Corp uses, given growing concerns around colony collapse disorder and die-off of bee populations, especially in the US, what role do you see for technology like Verifly in sustaining and maintaining healthy bee populations?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's a lot of factors contributing to beehive health. It is really hard right now to keep strong beehives for pollination and honey production. So beekeepers are having to do more than ever to keep those hives alive. So because of all the challenges that they're currently faced with, they're basically spending a lot more money to get their beehives ready for pollination, since they need to be a certain strength to actually pollinate a crop, and then also ready for honey production. So because of that, they have had to pass a lot of their cost on to growers through pollination fees. So they've had to increase their pollination fees to stay profitable, since they're having to spend so much on inputs. And that's obviously created an instability in the market where these fees have shot up for growers as well. And so that actually is exactly the part of the problem that Verifly solves. So growers, when these prices started increasing, started ordering inspections. This has now become a really significant input to their operation, especially for almond growers. And so they've started to order inspections just to make sure the hives that show up meet the contract, so are what they paid for. But really what's most important to the growers is the hive is healthy enough and strong enough to pollinate their crop, because they have to have that or they won't have their yields. So it's a really important, basically appraisal assessment to make sure that crop pollination is gonna go okay. And so we're actually solving a problem that's arisen out of beehive health, but we're ultimately pretty excited about the secondary impacts of what we're working on to actually help growers and beekeepers increase the strength. So make sure we're getting strong hives out for pollination, but we can probably also decrease the number of hives. So beekeepers can get higher prices, balance out their revenue, but ultimately they're able to send fewer hives, which is less straining on stress. And then really, I think there's some other impacts on how Verifly can help researchers who are studying impacts on health, like are some of the nutrition products actually contributing to hive health? Are there chemical combinations that are contributing negatively? So we're quite excited about how Verifly can be used to study some of those impacts so that we can better understand how we keep these hives healthy and what needs to be done. So, that for us is really what keeps me rewarded, especially as somebody who's studied, environmental science.
So to turn to another aspect of hive health, recently there have been reports of Asian giant hornets, which are known for attacking bees, being spotted in the United States. What is your reaction to this news been at the B Corp, and how can beekeepers maintain healthy hives given the threat posed by this hornet right now? And how should they think about preparing for any similar threats that might arise in the future as anthropogenic climate change leads to the migration of more non-native species, potentially including those that harm bees?
Okay, that second question we're definitely going to have to come back to. Yeah, I have been asked about this week from everybody. I mean, even my grandma called me, and I had to talk through this with her, which was fun. So, yeah, this is pretty interesting what's happening right now. I mean, a few years ago, watched a video on YouTube of these things, and, somewhere, Japan or wherever it was, where this video was taken. And it's quite disturbing what these wasps do to beehives. We have seen in our R&D hives we used to have evidence of what I like to call battle royale between bees and wasps. So these hornets are not the only types of wasps that eat bees. However, they are the only types of hornets that are very effective at actually working together to hunt. So similar to like shark species, most of our shark species hunt solitary, right? They work on their own, but there are some shark species, I think hammerhead's one of them, but don't quote me, that actually work together for their hunt. So that's what's more dangerous about it, because together they can actually fully decimate a hive versus a couple wasps, a strong beehive can manage against. So that's, why these wasps are pretty scary, and they can rip through a hive very quickly. Now, the problem with, and I think this will start to get at your second question, then I'll talk about impacts of this. The problem when we have invasive insect species is they're very, very hard to eradicate. So there's some strategies that scientists can use. They can try to send out sterilized males or sterilized females to decrease reproduction. But it's very difficult with insects since they reproduce so quickly. So other insect species we've had that have come into North America, like the emerald ash borer, we were not able to contain. So, myself, through studying this in school, I'm not very optimistic that this will be able to be contained. I think we can slow it and allow beekeepers some time to prepare. but I am not confident that we'll be able to contain it. I will be so happy if I'm proven wrong. So, as this spreads, I was reading earlier this week, there are some beekeepers in Japan that have developed a lineage of, through breeding, of bees that actually fight against these wasps. So they create these heat balls. Most bees create heat balls, but they particularly target these wasps with it and, burn the wasps without killing themselves. It's pretty cool. So I would imagine we'll probably start to see, and this is now where I'm just predicting what could happen. So none of this is fact. I would imagine some beekeepers might start to experiment with some of those genetics. So actually crossbreed some of those with the species that they're working with so that they could have bees that are more resistant to this. And that's done. I mean, that was done with the varroa mite. There's a lot of breedings done to actually get hives that are more resistant to the point where there's a stock of bees that will actually bite the legs of varroa mites. So this is a really good answer that beekeepers use to fight against challenges because bees are extremely innovative. They reproduce quickly too, so they evolve very quickly to challenges. And this breeding is very similar to like dog breeding, right? So it can be done, through artificial insemination or even through naturally breeding queens together or queens and drones together. However, if we get these stocks, I'd imagine they're probably pretty aggressive. So myself working commercial bees, it's going to be even more unfun because right now commercial bees are already pretty aggressive because they have to be. So I imagine that's going to be more frustrating, but that's not a real problem. And then, this is just one more thing, one more challenge beekeepers have to deal with. So if this actually starts to wipe out hives, they're going to have to do the same thing, right? They spend more money to basically split the strong hives to be able to meet their pollination contract, and all of that, just like it's done before, is going to get rolled back onto the grower. So the exact same impacts on what we talked about earlier. And so hopefully that answers the second part of your question too. But I would just say this won't last. There's going to be more and more effects, for beehive populations. Climate change absolutely has impacts on the species for sure.
So to turn to another crisis that has impact on bees, I'm curious, your co-founder, Wyatt Wells, wrote on the B Corp website last month about how COVID-19 is impacting bees and almonds. Can you describe in a bit more detail how the current coronavirus pandemic is impacting your business specifically, and more broadly, how it's impacting commercial beekeepers and growers?
Yeah, and I think even there's been some updates since he put that blog out on just more impacts we've seen, and there will be more impacts from what I say today because this is an evolving situation. So I think so a few things. I mean, almond production is stable. So when we've talked to our almond growers, to actually produce an almond, it's pretty automated, meaning you can use a lot of tractors and equipment. There isn't a lot of groups of people that have to work together to like prune or harvest like there are in a lot of our other specialty crops. So the labor risk right now is not a concern for almonds. Excuse me. I think there's a market risk. So some almond growers have had trouble in the last couple months getting their almonds into certain countries that are locking down borders. Luckily, almonds are shelf-stable product, so they can last about 3 years. So this isn't as big of an impact as it is on, fresh produce that if that can't get into the port, there, that's it. It's going to rot right there in the shipping container. So that's, one of the impacts that's happening, although I think that's a shorter term impact. I think longer term, we're not sure what's going to happen with, almond harvest and almond production. So in processing plants, I've been in several processing plants. There are some areas where people have to work together, and close by each other to sort through almonds as they're moving down a line to, pull out rocks that aren't filtered out through an automatic sorter. So there is some of that, hopefully they can, that won't be till October. Hopefully they can get some guidance from some of the other factories that are starting to open back up on how to do this safely. And then on the commercial beekeeping side, like a lot of areas of agriculture, they're having trouble getting labor in the country. So a lot of folks come in from other countries to work bees, seasonally. And, I've read some reports about issues sourcing that. So I don't know. I don't think that's industry spread, but that's certainly a challenge some beekeepers are faced with. And then there's still, there's essential work, pollination. So they're still pollinating and moving bees into different crops right now. So as far as market impacts, we are very fortunate to have, there's my cat. We're very fortunate to have minimal impacts in our market. And then as a startup, our market's stable. We finished pollination season before all this happened. So we're able to, obviously I'm home, we're working from home, and able to do that really easily. We will keep doing this as long as we need to. So we'll be one of the last companies in Indiana to come back online or come back in the office, because most of what we do is online, and we can do it pretty effectively that way, although we miss each other and we miss our office. And then and lastly, it's just a crazy time right now for funding in the startup environment. Startup is a part of the risk capital market, and the risk capital market gets impacted when we're in a recession or when we're in a risky time. So I know a lot of fellow startups that are struggling to get funding. Luckily, there's some asks to Congress to help out. Our granting agency, the National Science Foundation, has been excellent. Our investors have been excellent. And I think we're seeing more of that as this is starting to become normal and people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that was probably more than you asked for on impact. We've got lots of areas of our business that are different.
No, that was great. Thank you. And I'm curious, could you speak a bit more to whether you see the effects of COVID on commercial pollination and the agricultural sectors that impacts like almond growing playing out differently in the United States as opposed to in other countries or in other parts of the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll be honest, I'm probably less of an expert to address that question, because I'd have to think pretty deeply about, what's each country's approach and what are they deeming essential, what is being shut down. So I don't think I'm fully qualified to answer that. But of course, everything I've said is going to depend on whether agriculture production is still happening in those countries, including beehives as a part of that production. And I think probably a lot of countries are keeping that open. Specifically, I've not heard of any, disasters or anything right now. I think if anything, folks want to keep food security clean and secure, but I'll be honest, I don't have very detailed information on what the different nuances is and different challenges of different pollination markets globally right now.
In the United States, do you have an idea of where it's being hit the hardest?
Pollination?
Yeah.
Just labor, just getting, like I mentioned before, just making sure they can secure enough labor is the issue, biggest issue. Beekeepers as well, they work in teams. They have to work pretty closely together, but these aren't very large teams. These are usually teams of like sometimes 2 guys, sometimes 4. So they're probably able to stay pretty well contained. And usually teams are working together every day anyway. So like the same 2 people are usually working together. Of course, that depends on, what's going on, but typically they like to do that because once you work bees with somebody, you get like a 6th sense to, what they're doing. And so I know that a lot of commercial guys like to keep it that way. So that's probably helping with not cross-containing, especially at some of the really bigger operations. But really that's the main challenge they're facing. Otherwise, from what we've seen, things are pretty normal.
Finally, so I'm wondering what advice you have for current students who are in beekeeping clubs, like the one that you were in, or more broadly, people who are passionate about commercial pollination and this line of work.
Well, come work for the Bee Corp. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. You can reach out, look at our careers page if you're interested in, being a part of what we're working on. I would say if you're working on a beekeeping club, what you're doing is amazing and incredible, and you are being a part of educating the next generation going into the workforce that's going to better understand, the important role that pollinators are playing into our ecosystem and our economy. So definitely I applaud you on that, and that's super important work. If you want to stay in the bee space, there's so many avenues you can take. You can go an entomology route and help be a part of researching, like one thing we've mentioned, some of those genetics that are more resistant to some of the problems. You can work in the nutrition space and actually help develop better enzymes and better combinations to keep bees healthy. And so that's a big thing. Even like probiotics are being fed to bees. If you are interested in the agriculture side, the commercial operations would love to have you. And they need business experts. They need people, not just working bees, but helping manage the logistics. These are crazy operations of bees getting shipped across the country several times throughout the year. If you want to work on the technology and innovation side, obviously our company's working on a solution. There's a lot of companies out there solving different aspects of this problem and doing really good work. So there's a lot of room for different disciplines in this space. And I would say people, especially in ag, people are very excited about young people coming in and solving these problems, because that's the next generation to, take on a big task, which is feeding 9 billion people in 30 years.